Coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, you're listening to Mythic Radio.
The first time it happened, I was sleeping and woke up because I felt a hand on my leg and I realized that I couldn't move.
And he come across this object on the ground, which was the shape of a flying saucer. So he jumped out of his pickup and went down there, and there was 4 beings laying on the ground.
When I raised my head back up, I was turning my head, and out of my peripheral vision, I seen something hop to a tree. And it was tall, about 7-8 foot tall, and it was black, real hairy, like a gorilla.
The first thing we saw was this winged creature, 14-foot wingspan at least. It was huge. It almost covered half the road.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Nick. Today is Friday, September 8th, and this is episode number 12. You can visit us over at mythicradio.com and share your own experiences by clicking on the Tell Your Story link. You can also get involved by joining our forum. It's a great place to ask questions and start new topics on what interests you. You can also find us on Facebook at Mythic Radio and on Twitter at Mythic Radio Live. I'd also like to remind you that if you enjoy the show, please click the follow and like buttons. It helps us know what kind of content you find interesting. New episodes of the podcast are available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, and YouTube. In the White Mountains of Arizona, on Wednesday, November 5th, 1975, a group of loggers in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest were finishing up their workday. As the workers turned off their chainsaws, the sun began to set, and evening quickly blanketed the forest. Travis Walton and his boss and best friend, Mike Rogers, along with their crew, gathered the saws and oil cans and loaded up the truck for the hour and 20-minute journey back to town. The men piled in the truck, rolled the windows down, and pulled on to the dirt road that led through the forest. Spirits were high as the old truck drove along the bumpy back road. Several minutes later, Travis noticed a reddish glow coming through the trees, off to the right about 100 yards away. At first he believed it to be the setting sun, but then it occurred to him that the sun had set about 30 minutes earlier. The other men sitting on the right side of the truck became very quiet, as if they too were seeing this strange light. Travis then pondered whether it might be a forest fire off in the distance. As they drove, the strange glow became closer and closer until they eventually could see what appeared to be a yellow light near the tops of the trees. At one point, one of the men caught a glimpse of the object through the pines and said that it looked as though a plane had crashed in the tops of the trees. As they raced to the top of the ridge, the trees parted into a clearing and one of the men yelled, "Stop the truck!" Skidding to a halt, they all looked over toward the clearing and could clearly see the strange glowing object hovering just above the tops of the trees. It wasn't a plane. Amazed by what they saw, Travis opened his door to get a better look at the object. Hoping to get a closer look and worried that it might fly away, Travis stepped out of the truck and moved toward the unidentified craft. As he got closer, he could see that the object was approximately 10 feet thick and about 20 feet wide, and it had the appearance of a saucer or disc. Travis continued to move closer to the ship, and after a few moments, the craft began to emit a thunderous roar. The vibration could be felt by Travis as well as the men in the truck. At this point, a bluish-green beam of light radiated from the bottom of the ship, and it paralyzed Travis as it struck him in the chest. The men watched helplessly from the truck as Travis stood motionless, engulfed in the bright beam of light. What they saw next shook them to their very core. Travis's body stiffened, and a powerful surge came through the beam and lifted him into the air. Within seconds, Travis's limp body was thrown backwards and hit the ground with a horrible thud. The men watched in horror as their friend's body lay lifeless on the ground. Believing that Travis was dead, and fearing for their own safety, the men shut the doors and accelerated down the dark forest road. As Mike Rogers drove the speeding truck through the forest, he asked if the craft was following them, but none of the men responded. Seconds passed as the men drove down the road, watching the skies behind them. Realized that they weren't being followed, Mike Rogers pulled the truck over, and the men argued over what exactly they had seen. After a heated discussion, the men finally agreed that they had to go back for Travis. Mike Rogers quickly turned the truck around, and they headed back toward the site. Minutes later, they returned to the location, but neither Travis nor the unidentified craft were present. Mike Rogers and his crew searched the surrounding forest for any signs of their teammate, but never found any trace of Travis or the hovering ship. Unable to make any headway with the search, Mike Rogers gathered his crew, and the distraught men piled in the truck and headed toward home in Heber, Arizona. Once back in town, the men hesitantly informed authorities of their experience, and the next morning, local citizens and police combed the area of the national forest where Travis Walton had gone missing. No evidence of Travis was recovered. For the next 5 days, people continued to search for Walton without any luck. Meanwhile, Rogers and his crew were questioned and harassed by authorities and disbelievers, yet all the men remained insistent on what they had witnessed. During this time, the men were asked to take polygraph tests, which they eventually agreed to. One of the men failed to complete the test, but Mike Rogers, along with the rest of the crew, passed with flying colors. On Tuesday, November 11th, at 12:05 a.m., the phone in Travis's sister's house rang. Grant, Travis's brother-in-law, answered the phone and was amazed at what he heard. A familiar voice on the other end said, "They brought me back." Travis informed him that he was in a phone booth in Heber, and he asked Grant to come and get him. Grant told Travis to stay put. He immediately left for Heber, picking up Travis's brother Dwayne on the way. As the two men arrived in front of the phone booth, they were astonished and relieved to see that it was indeed Travis, cowering inside the phone booth. Dwayne and Grant helped Travis into the truck and began the 33-mile drive back home. Later that evening, word reached the press of Travis's return. So where had Travis Walton been for the last 5 days? Had he really been taken aboard this strange craft in the woods? And if so, what had he experienced during his alleged abduction? Only Travis Walton can truly answer that question.
When I regained consciousness, I was in such pain that it would actually sort of knock me back out again, the pain, you know. I was lying on my back, I was looking up at a light over me. You know, I could tell I was probably on some kind of a raised surface. It may have been my hands were falling off the edge of the table, on the edge or something. The impression, you know, added to because the ceiling and light above me were so close. I thought I was in a hospital. There was some sort of device across my chest. I had a lot of pain in my chest. So maybe this thing was some sort of treatment or, you know. I didn't know. I couldn't see all that clearly. It was blurry and double vision. And I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I just took this to be doctors, that things were being taken care of. I was on some sort of a raised table, a gurney operating table or something. And then when I looked in the direction of the movement sounds, you know, I could see blurry forms that I thought were doctors wearing surgical caps and masks, you know, with just an area across where the eyes would be that would be uncovered by that. But when I sharpened the focus in my eyes, I could see that was not the case, that I was looking into the face of this creature. And then I knew I was not in the hospital, and I was in very great danger. I felt that, you know, this was extremely life-threatening. And here this face was so close to me, another right behind him, that, you know, the fear gave me the strength to raise my arm and try to hit him away. But it was so weak I could barely move my arm, and it wouldn't have killed a fly. It pushed the one that was standing close to me back, and he fell into the other one. But almost in the same motion, I was rolling away from him, and this object across my chest fell off. But my attention was riveted on them. They were immediately coming around the table towards me. I got on my feet and staggered back. I felt very weak and unsteady, and I backed up. I was actually sort of stumbling backwards, and I bumped up against a shelf or a workbench, and there was an array of instruments laying out there. It was just a quick glance. I didn't stand there and study them. I was just riveted on these creatures coming towards me. I just glanced, grabbed the biggest thing I could find, and started flailing in their direction to keep them from coming any closer. And they stopped, and at that moment was the peak of the fear and the focus of my nightmares for months afterwards was this point at which they stopped with their hands extended towards and staring in a way that felt invasive and intrusive, like they were looking inside of me in a way that just gave me this squirmy feeling in my head that it was agonizing. It was horrible. But once it was apparent they weren't going to physically or even telepathically control me, they turned and left the room.
For the next few minutes, Travis heads down a small, winding hallway in the hopes of locating a door to an exit, but instead finds himself in a strange room with a single chair in the center of it.
My attention was suddenly diverted, whether it was a change in the light from the door that I'd just come through or a sound. I'm not sure what, or maybe just something out of the corner of my eye. But I turned and there was a man in the door that I just come through. And I immediately, this was a familiar human form it was very reassuring to me to think that this was somebody there to rescue me. Police or military, Air Force, NASA, something, And so I started towards him and was just human-looking being. This was somebody that would pass in a crowd. A tall, young man, light-colored hair, light-colored eyes. Something odd about the eyes. I wasn't really focused on that at that point because he had this glass helmet over his head. But at this point, I was mainly trying to get a response about where I was and where get me out of here, sort of thing. So when he took me by the arm and was leading me out, I figured this was a rescue, and I was only very happy to go. So we went through what I think was an airlock. This door closed and that door opened, and we went out, and the air was cooler and fresher and so much easier to breathe. But I was almost blinded by the brightness. It was just, normal soft sunlight sort of look, but it's so much brighter than the interior of that craft. And but so much of a relief to be in a cooler, easier to breathe situation. I tried to look around just a little bit. I was mainly concerned about where he was taking me. And he seemed to be in a hurry because he was making me move faster than I felt able to. I was weak and unsteady on my feet. I glanced around enough to see that there were some other disc-shaped craft parked inside of this enclosure. At this point, the craft we came out of was parked inside of this big hangar-like building, or it might have been part of a larger craft. Some people think it was like a mothership or something, or it could have been like just an airplane hangar somewhere. And we went through some other doors into a room where there were some other people. They were very similar to him. A similar dress, similar coloring, light-colored hair, light-colored eyes. But it was there that I started to notice something sort of unusual about the eyes. But again, my focus was on where am I, what's happening to me, what just happened to me, what are you doing with me? And then I wasn't getting answers to these questions. And I started to become alarmed that this wasn't a rescue at all, that I was still in some kind of terrible situation. Do I trust these people? They won't even answer me. And they're leading me, they're, taking me by the arm and putting me over towards this table. And then so I started to pull back. If they're not going to answer my questions, I'm not cooperating. And they were so much stronger than I was. They actually felt stronger than a normal person. I was in a weakened condition, but I felt their strength. But still, the panic I had at being restrained like that, I was able to jerk one hand free, and they put this mask over my face, and I got my finger under the edge of that trying to pull it away. But before I could pull it away, boom, I was out. I think there was some kind of a gas in there that was like a anesthesia or something.
The next thing Travis recalls is waking up on his stomach on a cold highway west of Heber. As he pulled himself up, he saw a silvery metallic craft hovering just over the road. The ship stayed for only a moment before shooting off into the night sky. Travis ran down the road until he came to a gas station with a row of phone booths and frantically dialed his sister's number. Travis believed that his ordeal had only lasted a few hours, but after being picked up by his brother Dwayne and his stepbrother Grant, he was bewildered to learn that he had been missing for 5 days. Travis theorizes that he must have been unconscious for the majority of his abduction. During a physical exam that took place shortly after his return, Travis was found to be in overall good health, despite showing signs of weight loss. In the weeks and months that followed his return, Travis Walton and his crew continued to endure harsh skepticism from friends and authorities. Many claimed that they had perpetuated a hoax in order to gain notoriety. The men underwent additional polygraph tests, and while most of the tests showed that the men were truthful, one test in particular was thought to show deception. However, when the test was re-administered, it showed that the answers given were in fact truthful. In 1978, Travis Walton published a book called The Walton Experience, retelling his in-depth story of what occurred during his ordeal. 15 years later, in 1993, a loosely based movie adaptation was made called Fire in the Sky. While the movie was enjoyable to watch, it was harshly criticized for its inaccurate portrayal of what actually took place. To this day, many UFO researchers believe that the Travis Walton story is one of the best documented cases of alien abduction in history. I believe Travis Walton and his crew sound genuine when hearing them describe their encounter, but without hard evidence, we may never know for sure what really happened the night in the White Mountains of Arizona. For more detailed information regarding this case, I recommend visiting Travis Walton's website, as well as the MUFON page. You can find links to both sites in the description below. What do you guys think? Is this some elaborate hoax, or actual proof of alien abduction? Let me know in the comments below. If you have a question or story for me, you may contact me at mythicradio@gmail.com or by visiting mythicradio.com. Join me on the next episode as we talk about one of my favorite hotels and one of the most haunted places in America, the RMS Queen Mary. From all of us at Mythic Radio, thanks for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.